Okay, well, hey everyone. My name is Ezra Smith. I am a lawyer here in Fayetteville, and I'm really sorry. I guess I should start off by saying that I can't do this training in person, right? I wish that we could all be there together working and have questions, but this is the best we can do in 2020. So I hope this training on how to be an in-person poll watcher will be helpful to you. If you're looking to be an absentee canvassing poll watcher, that's a different training. But if you're trying to be a poll watcher during early voting or on election day, then I hope this training will help you. So let's get started. The right to poll watch exists under Arkansas law. Pretty cool thing, common in the states, but the Arkansas Code establishes a procedure that a candidate, a party, or any group affiliated with an issue, right? So the issues that you'll vote on to amend the Constitution, they're allowed to have poll watchers at every precinct in Arkansas. And the poll watcher is allowed to both monitor the process, but also to challenge parts of the process. And so we're going to break down the duties and responsibilities, but let's just get to the basics. Who can be a poll watcher? Basically anybody. You just need to be, like I said, affiliated with a candidate, an issue group, or a political party. And you'll have to have identification, and we're going to talk about some of the other things you're going to need next. So the most important thing, and this is the big one, is you'll need an authorization, and it looks like this. You have to present this authorization at your precinct the moment you get there in order to be authorized to poll watch. So it has to have your signature and the signature of your candidate, group, or party. It also has to have the signature of the county clerk of the respective county that you're in. So you'll have to get it signed, get it notarized, and then take it to the county clerk for their approval. It's that all once done is your ticket in. So plan ahead. Don't forget this, because you will not be allowed, and it is very difficult, especially on election day, to track down and get the county clerk, who is crazy busy. So I know that early voting starts soon. But go ahead and get this document now and have it with you when you get there, and it wouldn't hurt to make copies. So what else should I bring? Well, bring the form. I'll stop talking about it, but it is so important. Wear appropriate clothing and be your own judge here, but nothing remotely political, or you'll start to run afoul of rules against electioneering, which I'm going to go into in a little bit more depth later on in the PowerPoint. Bring your mask, right? Can't go anywhere without that. Bottle of water wouldn't hurt. Paper, clipboard, and pens, or a tablet. You're going to be needing to track voters' names and some other information. So it would be helpful to have something to write with or to write on. You'll need a hotline, either our hotline number, which is listed here, or another, depending on if you have a different group or candidate, whatever you've been instructed on. If you have a tablet or your cell phone, make sure that you have a charger, because you are going to be there for a while and you will be using it. And finally, Voter View, down here at the bottom, this link, it is a great resource. Have it pulled up. You'll be able to search voters and try to confirm information for poll workers in the case that it comes up. So it's a great resource. Now, let's talk about the rules of the room. So you're admitted, you've given your form, they've said you're an authorized poll watcher, you're in. Well, you have to be close enough, I mean in physical proximity, to make sure that you can hear what's going on in the check-in process, because that's what you're really observing. I say that to remind you that you can't be within 6 feet basically of anyone, right, because of the pandemic, but you really cannot be within 6 feet of a voting machine or a booth. Another rule, and it is the big rule, you can't speak with voters. Now, that may be subject to some flexibility, but the general rule is that you cannot talk to voters, and certainly you cannot talk to voters about how they're voting, right? You cannot electioneer or disrupt the process. Expect each precinct to have different rules on social distancing, and I trust you with your own health to determine what's safe and what allows you to do your job well. So you can't help if you can't hear or see what's going on, but certainly no one wants you to put yourself in danger of contracting coronavirus. So follow the local rules, follow the rules that feel reasonable to you, and just do your best. Okay, on election day, it is 7:30 to 7:30. They need to open on time and they cannot close before. If a voter is waiting in line by 7:30 p.m. on election day, They get to vote no matter how long it takes to process their vote, and it is your job to make sure that that precinct does not shut down until their votes are cast. Now that's different if you're working at an early voting location. So check your precinct because it's gonna have a different time probably. Know that time, but the same rule about being in line by the time it closes applies during early voting. Now, Arkansas is a voter ID state. So what kind of ID do voters need? Well, they have a lot of options. Recognize that voter ID is still a big hurdle to a lot of voters, but familiarize yourself with this list so that in the event a voter does bring in a form of ID other than a driver's license, right? Make sure that you know and can advocate for that voter that that's adequate, right? That works, that is sufficient under law, they should be entitled to vote. Okay, now this is the real reason you're here, part 2, the potential problems. So let's get into what you can expect and what you're going to be watching for. Now, there are average things that happen, right? Normal. So that's folks are running late and they don't open on time. Well, that's an important problem, but it's not the worst thing, right? Make sure they're getting it up and running as fast as they can. Now they may run out of ballots, and this is the case if they're using like a backup paper ballot system and they don't have enough. That's a huge problem. If they lose power, another big problem. You know, your role here is to make sure that things are being remedied quickly, or that they attempt to close early. We've already kind of talked about that. But there are other problems. You know, we have to just be frank. There have been and probably will be cases of voter intimidation, and it could be by the state or by people. And it's your job to be aware that either could happen. And the biggest concern here, right, is electioneering or pressure, right? Scaring people from the polls or pressuring them once they get there. And we'll talk more about electioneering, but it's another big issue to expect. Now, the overarching concern, or the overarching, not concern, wrong word, the overarching rule here for you all is that as we talk about the problems that you'll encounter, the answer to it is always going to be take it first to the election sheriff or judge or supervisor. Those are all the, you know, who knows what words they'll use, but that's the person who's in charge of your precinct. So if you see any problems, and we're going to run through a list of potential issues and things to expect, that's where you go. That's where you bring violations or you know, inconsistencies or whatever. That's, you take it to the election sheriff. Okay, so oops, problem with the animation there at the bottom. What should you do if there is an equipment or an internet problem? Well, go to the election sheriff, right? Make sure that they are having their backups employed, whether it's tabulating votes offline that they then send in, or it's paper ballots. Whatever it is, make sure that people are not languishing in line while we wait for a technical difficulty. And here you can be helpful too in catching a problem as it starts to pop up, right? And then being proactive and encouraging the election workers to do something to fix it, right? I mean, obviously, it's pretty hard when the power goes out, but you can be a big role in saying, hey, let's get paper ballots out, right? Let's get people, as you know, if we can, to be voting so that we're not wasting their time or certainly turning them away. Now, let's talk about voter ID. It's not an exact match, and this is something that poll workers don't often mistake, but can. I've seen this before. As always, if you have problems with how workers are dealing with IDs at your precinct, take it immediately to the sheriff. Have them set out a ruling and give proper instructions as soon as you can, because recognize that as the problem persists, voters are going to be turned away. Now let's talk about the process that they use so you know how to check it. If there is a problem with someone's ID for whatever reason, it should be taken to the election judge or sheriff, right, like who we've talked about, and they should compare the photo and the name. That's very important, because when we compare the photo here, it's not, you know, it's not an attempt to match you back to the person you were when your picture was taken. If your hair is different, if you've gained or lost weight, or whatever reason, it's similar, right? Or is it a similar photo, not a match? So that's a problem that you can see sometimes, is being too harsh with the photos. Similarly, the same rule for names. Is it a substantially similar name? That's adequate. The rule that you need to help people enforce here is that marginal cases should go for the voter, right? The rule should not be against people casting their vote. Um, and that's why you can play a big role in helping resolve these, right? And saying, that's not what the rules mandate, actually. This is an acceptable form of ID. Let's let this person vote. But you will come across folks who have insufficient ID. And I want to talk to you about what that process looks like. So, and we'll talk about other reasons why you may not be allowed to vote. But if you're not allowed to vote for reasons of insufficient ID, you have to vote provisionally. And we're also going to talk about provisional balloting, so I'll kind of skim over that. But what it means basically is that you have to show up and give proper ID by noon the following Monday after the election. And as you can imagine, a lot of people don't make that deadline. The best thing you can do here is make sure that a voter who's voted a provisional ballot knows that this process is out there and that they have more to do. They need to come back and fix this, because often voters don't realize and they leave, and then if they do realize, it's too late. Now, a big part of this, and this is stepping again a little bit more into provisional balloting, voters will have the option to sign a verification of identity statement. And this is really recommended because what it does is, unlike the provisional ballot process without the identification statement, if you sign this and submit it, then your vote will be counted unless the county commission determines there's a reason it shouldn't be. So without the statement, the burden is on the voter. With the statement, the burden is actually on the commission, and it's more likely that their vote will be tabulated rather than denied at the provisional balloting stage, which I'll talk about a little bit more. This is a problem that you'll probably not encounter, so I'm going to move quickly through it. If you're at a voting center or if you're at a county that doesn't have voting centers that vote by precinct, then the geography can matter. If they cannot find a voter, they should check the county rolls and then double check them basically with the election supervisor. And if a voter's at the wrong precinct, they need to just go across town to their appropriate precinct. They should be given a form and directions by that precinct. And that form allows them basically to pass the line when they get to the appropriate place. So you'll probably not experience that because most Arkansas counties have moved from precinct voting to voting by center. And when you have a voting center system, you can vote anywhere in the county as long as you're in the right county. And it's a lot of counties in Arkansas, so you're probably in a county that deals with voting centers, but you may not be, right? So be ready if you're not. Now, this is a reason or a question of, okay, why isn't a voter on the rolls? What are the reasons? And there are a few, right? They make sense mostly. Wrong place, not a citizen, registered somewhere else. This very technocratic fourth bullet point here is failing to respond to certain mailings from the state can put you on an inactive list and then purge you from the rolls. Very problematic, but possible. They could have died, obviously. Now, if they've shown up and are marked deceased, I think we've solved that. But there are other reasons too, right? They've been convicted of a felony or adjudicated to be mentally incompetent, or it could be an error. So keep in mind that these are the reasons, and if there's a different reason being asserted, it's probably not a lawful reason to keep them from voting. Here are the questions a poll watcher should ask. So be listening, be watching for them to be engaging with voters and trying to resolve problems rather than kicking them, just off to a provisional ballot because it's not pulling up immediately, right? Sometimes a few questions can help resolve a problem and allow a voter to vote. And that's what you're there to do, is make sure that those processes are in place. Okay, physical disability of any kind or a linguistic disability are not permissible barriers to voting. If you have a voter who cannot vote for any of these reasons, call the hotline. That voter will be allowed to vote. If they need a translator, we'll get one. If they need accommodations to get in the building, we'll find one or take them somewhere else where they can vote. The county is not allowed to turn away people. And if your county doesn't have the resources it needs to accommodate voters who speak a different language or have a disability, call us. We'll inform the right people and work with you, and we'll get whatever they need. But do not let anyone be turned away for these reasons. Okay, what if a voter requests an absentee ballot, which makes sense, right, in 2020, but then they decide they want to vote early or on election day? Well, since they've requested the ballot, they will be allowed to vote in person provisionally, and their provisional ballot will be counted if they did not send in an absentee ballot, right? Does that make sense? They'll be basically just a double check to make sure that that person didn't vote twice. Now, we've talked about this a little bit. I want to get into it more. there are laws protecting polling locations from electioneering. If you see people distributing material or harassing people or getting too close to the door, those are all violations. Those are all things that need to be reported to the election sheriff so that they can remedy it. And if they are not doing enough, you need to call the hotline, and we will work on it. But there are rules. This is not something to be taken lightly. People can be very easily scared away from voting. 100 feet away is not very far distance to walk or park. So keep in mind that you can play a really big role in keeping this a space where people can come and go without fear or without intimidation. And given the rhetoric of the 2020 campaign, I think that it's likely that you'll see at some locations protests and counter protests. So be ready for that. Probably not a majority rule, but I would expect it at some places. Okay, now this is as we start to wrap up, I want to talk about provisional balloting because I've thrown the term around. If for any reason you are not deemed eligible to cast your vote, it is likely you'll be allowed to vote provisionally. And provisional ballots are just subject to another check by the Election Commission as they tabulate the final count of votes. We call provisional balloting the danger zone because it's complicated, right? I've already talked about this. If there are more steps for a voter, like they need to show up to another place after election day, the odds are they're not going to do that. And if they don't do that, then the county commission doesn't have the proof it needs to show that they're an eligible voter, so they're not going to have their vote counted. So it should be, in your mind, a solution of last resort. If you see election sheriffs or poll workers who are just, kind of defaulting to provisional balloting, stop that, advocate against that. Call the hotline, do whatever you can to move provisional balloting away from a quick solution to a problem, but rather something that is just deemed for folks who, we cannot figure out what's stopping them. And recognize that you'll be fighting against not only the natural tendency of folks to not want to hear what you're saying, but also against the pressure, right? Because a lot of times people are told to vote provisionally because they've got a long line behind them. The workers feel pressured to process people faster. You're supposed to be there to be that calming tension that says, no, let's figure this out if we can. So here are the reasons why someone should be voting provisionally. These are the factual reasons why. They're not on the list. They don't have the voter ID. It doesn't match appropriately. Or if they've been if they've requested an absentee ballot like we've talked about, or if their vote has been challenged by a poll watcher, which is the last thing we'll talk about. And then this other provision that is a bit of a very narrow exception I'll let you read about. If you have a court order and you're not in line on time, you can vote provisionally. The point being, though, if it's not one of those reasons, they should be allowed to cast a regular ballot. And you can be an advocate to say, hey, it's this person, for whatever reason, this is a discrepancy maybe, but it's not a reason that they cannot vote their normal ballot, a normal ballot that doesn't have to have any more checks, that can just be counted. Okay. This is the thin line, I guess, the hard line to walk as a poll watcher, because you have a power here and recognize that other poll watchers have the same power, and that is to challenge a vote. What you're challenging is the eligibility of a voter to cast their ballot. And that's a powerful tool, and it should be, I think, taken or should not be taken lightly. So here's the process. You'll see I've attached at the end of this PowerPoint a video that walks through the voting the process in Arkansas. If you're going to challenge a voter, you have to challenge that voter's eligibility before they sign the PVR list. And the reason for your challenge has to be either they are not eligible to vote where they are trying to vote, or they've already voted. But if a challenge is made after they've signed the list, it's invalid. It doesn't count. It's waived. When you challenge a voter, or when anyone does, you have to fill out a challenge ballot form, which is taken into the record with the provisional ballot, because that's how the voter will cast, because you've challenged it. They'll go from regular to provisional. That provisional ballot will be taken with your challenge ballot form, and it will be judged to determine whether your challenge is valid or if that voter should be allowed to vote. And that'll happen with the same batch of provisional ballots. Now, we hope everyone there is acting in good faith. But as you can imagine, it's a powerful tool to challenge ballots. So if for some reason you think that other poll watchers are challenging ballots in bad faith, recognize that you are really the only person in the room who can advocate against them to the election sheriff, and hopefully, you can give compelling facts and cite to the rules and convince the election sheriff that this poll watcher is acting inappropriately or incorrectly, and stop this behavior by allowing these voters to vote a regular ballot rather than a provisional one. Because recognize that if they're just challenging and churning up provisional ballots, it's an investment in stopping these people from voting, right? So it's something I've seen before, and like electioneering, it may not be present everywhere, but if you see it at your precinct, you have a duty to advocate against it. Okay, so in conclusion, your best resources are the Arkansas State Board of Elections. They make the rules, they enforce the rules, it's their rules you're playing by, so know them. And they spell them all out. They have great videos, including this one that I'll link to, of how the voting process should work. So if you have time, familiarize yourself with these documents and these resources. And as always, if you have questions, contact us. You can reach out by phone or by email, but we want to help you. And certainly, if you need us, call us and call the hotline on election day or early voting. It is a resource for you. You're not bothering anyone. It is a system that only works if we work it. So you're the eyes. We don't know what's going on unless you call and let us know, and then we can open up our resources and help you, right? We'll have lawyers, we'll have other folks who can help you on the ground. But like I said, we don't know what's going on if you don't tell us. Good luck. As always, this is a super important election. All elections are important, but you can play a vital role in ensuring that our voting process where you are is free and fair, and that is a powerful thing. So I thank you for your time and wish you the best of luck. Be safe and well, and yeah, enjoy it. It is a rewarding time. So thanks.